Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It is an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, my international friends, gather around the virtual water cooler with us as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies, movie news, and all sorts of good stuff. And, of course, joining us here today on this glorious Monday, we got a little bit of a late start, but he's here now, ladies and gentlemen. It's one Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing, sir?
John, do you know that today is the 30th anniversary of the hunt for Red October?
No.
Yes,
really?
It is. And now one of my favorite powerhouse, John McTiernan, coming off of Predator, coming off of Die Hard, that first Tom Clancy adaptation. Man, I love that movie. And it just came out on 4K Steelbook, Blu-ray, 4K UHD last week. It's very exciting, John. Very exciting.
It is still, to me, the best of the Jack Ryan movies. I mean, it's still, I mean, there are a lot of other good ones too, but that one was just so good. Oh, Sean Connery was so great in that. Oh, I got to get back and watch it. Hey, listen, guys, it's good to have you guys here today, and we've got a lot of stuff that we need to cover here, so we're not going to waste any time, and we're going to get things kicked off here with a few off the tops. And the first off the top we're going to start with here today, guys, has to do with the upcoming Tom Holland film, Uncharted. Now, we know that they're doing an Uncharted film where they had directors, lost directors, delayed, this thing is, but it's going to start shooting here pretty soon. We found that out from Tom Holland. We know that Mark Wahlberg is going to be Sully, I believe, in the film. Well, now it's been announced this morning that Uncharted has just added another talent. And it's an Academy Award nominated talent. As a matter of fact, it's a dude who was just nominated for Best Actor at the Academy Awards this year. Antonio Banderas has been added to the cast. Now, they're not saying right now who it is he's playing. I didn't see any character details. But listen, Rob, I'm always saying it's never a bad thing to add talent. And when you're adding a guy who some people even thought might have maybe even should have won the Academy Award this year, but he was nominated for Best Actor this year, this is a really nice move and just kind of adds to the growing resume of this movie, Rob. Listen, this is a film that's had a lot of bumps along the way, but they're starting to piece together a really nice looking little project. Anyway, you're hearing Antonio Banderas is joining this. What do you make of that?
Well, John, he's one of my favorite actors. I mean, I loved him, watching him in Pedro Almodovar's Spanish films and how he sort of made the transition over to American films. He does great things like The Skin I Live In, then he'll be in Uncharted or Zorro or whatever it is he's in. I think he always classes up the joint, and it's great to see that he's in this movie. I would imagine he's probably the bad guy. I mean, I could see him as the villain, and I'd love that.
He would make a great villain.
I know, right?
I mean, we just saw him sort of have a sort of villainous role in Dr. Dolittle, which we try not to talk about the Dr. Dolittle film around here too much. That was unfortunate, right. but he would make a great villain. I completely agree with you. So listen, we don't know much else about it for now, guys, but you hear about Antonio Banderas, the guy who's already got a Hall of Fame kind of career, coming off another Academy Award nomination. Now he's joining this Uncharted movie. How are you guys feeling about it at this point? Jump on down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. Next thing off the top here that I want to talk about briefly here is this, guys. So this coming weekend, the new Pixar film Onward is going to be opening up in theaters. But this past Saturday, just a couple days ago, across the country, they held a couple of special fan screenings for the movie that you can get tickets for and go to for a special advance thing, and a whole bunch of people went. I know my theater was completely packed. So Ann and I decided to sneak out there and go watch Onward. I put up a quick initial review, but just for those of you who missed it, here are my basic feelings on it. I'll expand on a little bit. First of all, one of the things I should mention, Rob, is that we talked about on the show that instead of a Pixar short film, they were going to show a Simpsons short film.
Right.
And it was based around the Maggie character. Delightful. It was seriously, it was one of the, I can't remember. It's not the best Simpsons thing ever, but I honestly can't remember the last time I enjoyed something Simpsons related as much as I liked this little short film. And I was worried because, you know, Pixar does such a great job with their short films. I was worried going into it that, it's just gonna be a Simpsons thing. And it starts with, you know, Disney welcomes The Simpsons. And then it goes into this little short film. But I'm telling you, I was smiling and giggling. And by the end of it, it was just, like I said, I used the word delightful. It was really, really charming. So you're going to like, I think most of you guys are going to like this little Simpsons short film they do anyway. But anyway, so they have this movie Onward. The basic gist of the movie is this, and we've known this for a while. It's set in a magical world where there's magic just isn't there anymore. Like, it's a magical world of elves and minotaurs and fairies and all that kind of stuff. But even in their world, magic passed away a long time ago because of modern conveniences. They feel like they didn't need magic anymore. Anyway, these two brothers, voiced by Chris Pratt and Tom Holland, they have grown up without their father, who passed away of an illness just before the Tom Holland character was born. So the Chris Pratt character, the big brother, he remembers his dad a little bit, but he was born. And then all of a sudden, the younger one, Tom Holland's character, turns 16. And for his 16th birthday, the mom, who's voiced by Julie Louis-Dreyfus, she comes out and says, your dad actually left you a birthday present to give to both of you once both of you were over the age of 16. And they open it up and it's a magic staff. This is all stuff we've seen in previews and stuff like that, so I'm not giving anything away. And within it is a spell that will bring their dad back for one day so they can meet their dad. Something goes wrong, and the entire movie is about them going on this quest to be able to complete their spell so they can spend one last day with their dad. This is not, Rob, the best Pixar movie. It actually does start a little bit slow. I'm not going to put it in like the top 5 Pixar films. Like, it's not on the Up level. It's not on the first Incredibles level. But when you're talking about Pixar, that is a really high standard.
Yeah.
This is still an absolutely wonderful film. And it's funny. It's got a lot of laughs. Of course, it's Pixar. But, my wife lost her dad just a couple of years ago. I lost my father-in-law a couple of years ago. And so my wife, she describes herself as ugly crying through the whole movie. And I'm sure anybody who's lost a parent is going to find, they find a way to touch on the emotion of it so beautifully while maintaining this magical, fun, and funny adventure that these brothers go on. And basically, the whole movie is an expression of a Dungeons and Dragons game. Now, when you see the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about, but that also, because my wife's a dungeon master, so that also got my wife really excited, because the whole movie is basically a Dungeons and Dragons adventure, and you'll see how that plays into it when you go see the movie for yourself. But overall, I just thought it was great. The voice acting was wonderful. The way they incorporated different types of mythologies into it, and what would it look like if it were a practical world. It was, and some things that you expect, like, oh, they've got a little pet dragon that acts like a pet dog. Okay, yeah, you expected that and all that kind of stuff. But it was so cute and so charming. And, Anna and I were already talking about, we're going to buy our tickets to go see it again this weekend. I was totally wonderfully enjoyed it. Again, not a top 5 Pixar film by any stretch, Rob, but this met my expectations. This met my expectations for what I was hoping for from a movie like this. It meets my expectations. So I don't know. You didn't get a chance to see it this weekend, Rob, but where's your expectations for it right now?
Well, I'm just a huge fan of Pixar. Everything they've done has, I mean, to me, one of their lesser films is like Cars. And even Cars is wildly enjoyable. I went and saw Cars 3 with my young nephew, and I mean, he ate it up. And I just this movie, the whole milieu of it looks delightful to me. Obviously, what a great lead to a pairing of Chris Pratt and the Marvel Cinematic Universe reteamed for a Pixar movie. Everything about it to me looks delightful. And hearing what you said I'm excited. I can't wait.
So guys, listen, I do recommend checking it out. It's an awful lot of fun. And what about some of you? Listen, it was public screening, so maybe a bunch of you guys saw it as well. What did you think about Onward? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With that down, let's go to our third off the top, and that is this. Now, one of the Disney films that got bumped a little bit, I think it was originally supposed to come out in 2019. I believe they bumped it into 2020, but is Artemis Fowl. Artemis Fowl. Now, they put out a first trailer a little while ago there, Rob, and it was interesting. It was an interesting trailer. They just put out a new trailer today for it, advertising it's coming. And I gotta say, I like this new trailer a lot more. Because listen, you gotta understand, you're making a movie like this, you're trying to target families. You're trying to also, one of your targets is kids, not your exclusive target. It's always good to see Colin Farrell in anything. So you got to make it feel fun and like there's an adventure to it. And I felt like that first trailer had no sense of adventure to it. You know, they had some wondrous stuff in it, but nothing that gave you a sense of adventure. And that's kind of what really targets families really well. This was a trailer that did kind of get to that adventure kind of feeling, not just with things. And Josh Gad looks way different in this than I thought he would. So I saw this trailer. I got to say, Rob, I quite enjoyed it. It's not the best trailer of the year so far or anything like that, but I thought it was a significant step up because they brought that really important element of adventure into it. So I don't know, Rob, where are your expectations sitting right now for a movie like Artemis Fowl?
Well, I feel like we've been seeing trailers for this for like a year. You know, and I'm glad that this looks good to me. I mean, I'm intrigued by it. Now, it's based on a series of books, right? I think.
Yes.
Now, I have not read the books, but the movie looks good, and I think, you know, we're getting a lot of these kinds of stories, and right now, I mean, we finally got Lock and Key that have been in development for a million years, and on Netflix, and I quite enjoyed that. And I don't know why I equate the two, but I think this is going to be good. It looks good to me, so I'm excited, to be honest.
Yeah, again, I have no idea if this movie's going to be great or terrible. I just don't know. But I just thought the second trailer was at least a step up from that first one. Question is, guys, are you looking forward to Artemis Fowl? What did you think of the new trailer as opposed to the first one? Do you have some expectations for this film? Do you have none? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, we've got one more off the top here before we get to our main topics here today, guys.
Wow.
And that last off the top is this. Now, of course, back at D23, Kevin Feige made some big announcements about upcoming Disney Plus shows that include Miss Marvel, things like that. But one of the ones that got everybody really excited was that of She-Hulk. Now, once they announced they were going to be doing a She-Hulk show, a big question that came up for everybody was, is Mark Ruffalo going to be a part of it? Are we going to have Hulk? Now, a bunch of people like myself said, I doubt they're going to have Ruffalo in it. I think they're going to probably want to make sure this can really be centered on the She-Hulk character, and they'll probably won't have him. I'm guessing they won't have him in there. Well, guess what? According to Mark Ruffalo, they very well may be having him and the Hulk in this She-Hulk show, because Mark Ruffalo was just at what is it called, CEDE or something like that. I can't remember the name of the festival he was at. And he was on stage and he was asked about it. And he said he has had some preliminary talks with Disney to appear in the She-Hulk series. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a big role, or maybe he's just being a little bit facetious, because I got to imagine, Rob, they probably know if Mark Ruffalo is going to be in it by now or not. They got to know by now if he is or not. I mean, you're putting your entire season together. I think you got to know. Maybe it's a big role. Maybe it's a small role. Maybe it's just a little appearance. Maybe it's a significant backup character to the She-Hulk character throughout. I'm not sure. But it is starting to look like they're going to have Ruffalo in here. Now, Rob, I would have initially thought before, and I said this before, that I thought they would avoid this because, you know, you want to keep the focus on She-Hulk. But I don't know, maybe having him in there is a way to prop up the character and give more legitimacy to the character and bring more eyeballs in to give the show a shot. I'm not sure. Rob, do you think Ruffalo will end up appearing in it? And then number two, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea to have him appear in it? What do you think?
Well, the first thing that gave me pause is that if Ruffalo appears in it and he appears as the Hulk, that's a lot of CG for a show, for a TV show. And it made me realize or think about, how are they going to realize She-Hulk? I guess because it's got to be MCU quality, they're sort of locked into doing that CG version of the Hulk or the Professor Hulk or whatever. And it excites me that, again, they seem to be sparing no expense with these streaming shows. But I think it's great. I think it's a natural. Maybe they'll only have him in the pilot, and then he'll recur occasionally. But I really like Ruffalo, and there's those rumors that Alison Brie was training, like maybe she's going to be She-Hulk, which I think is actually a really good idea. I love her, but I don't know. But having him in the show, they're just doing whatever they can to make sure that these streaming versions of the MCU are legit, man. This is, to me, it's just straight up. This is just as good as our movies. You got to watch it all, and it excites me, man. It excites me that I heard that the Moon Knight production was pushed back a little bit, but that kind of bummed me out. But to know that we're getting Mark Ruffalo in the She-Hulk series, bring it on, dude. Bring it on.
I don't know if you heard about this. I'm glad you brought up the Alison Brie thing, because I don't know if you heard of Alison Brie. Of course, she's in that what's the wrestling show on Netflix called again? Glow. Thanks. She's so great in Glow, and she was really good in Community. She's married to Dave Franco. A lot of people don't know that. But in case you guys didn't hear about this, there was some reports going around that a casting call had gone out for She-Hulk. And the casting call was asking for somebody. Here's what it reads. It reads, earlier this week, a rumor began making the rounds claiming that Marvel Studios was looking for this is what was in the casting call, Alison Brie type to play She-Hulk, to which apparently Alison Brie was just like an Alison Brie type, which of course raises the question, well, why not just go for Alison Brie? So then she was joking around, and apparently she said, I made a call to Marvel and I can't tell you what came of that. So I don't think we're actually going to get Alison Brie in there to play She-Hulk, but I'd be all for it. I think Alison Brie is awesome. Well,
there was a picture with her that I don't know if one of them tweeted this, but she was working out with Brie Larson.
Really?
So, yeah. So Alison Brie and Brie Larson, something like that. And I was like, all right, then.
Bring on the double Brie. So,
Alison Brie's in a really interesting movie called The Horse Girl or something that I believe I started watching it last night, actually, where she's a girl that starts suffering from, you don't know if it's schizophrenia or maybe she's being haunted by aliens. And it was way too late. I couldn't finish it, but it was really interesting. And I've been staying away from reading anything about it because I don't want it spoiled. But it's from the Duplass Brothers production company.
Ooh.
And it's pretty good so far. She's really good in it.
So I guess the question here is, guys, what do you think about the Ruffalo situation? Do you think he's actually going to appear in the show? If so, do you think that's a good idea? Maybe it's a bad idea. What do you guys think? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With all that stuff out of the way, guys, let's now move on to our main topics today. And how do we select our main topics here in the John Campea Show? Well, it's really rather simple. You see, you guys come up with them by going anytime 24/7 over to www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact. Once you guys get there, fill out the form with your topic or question, hit submit, it's totally free, and then maybe, just maybe, you might see your topic or question featured here on the John Campea Show. With that down, let's move on to that main topic number one. And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Samuel Pole, who writes, The Invisible Man made $290 million this weekend with $50 million worldwide off a $7 million budget. Blumhouse has done it again. What does this mean for the future of Universal Monsters and, more importantly, Leigh Whannell, who has now delivered 2 stellar movies with tiny budgets? All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, Samuel. And yes, Blumhouse continues to try to teach Hollywood a lesson it seems to not want to learn. You can make great movies without spending $200 million to do it. I mean, he's kind of following in the footsteps. Rob, I remember when District 9 came out.
Yeah.
They made that movie for $30 million. It's a visual effects heavy movie. They made that for $30-something million. Anyway, Invisible Man comes out. They made it for $7 million, makes $50 million over the weekend, 49 point something. At any rate, let's take a look at the chart here. This was the weekend box office. The Invisible Man made $29 million domestically. Sonic the Hedgehog dropped down to number 2, making $16 million at the box office. It's now made about $265 million worldwide, I believe. Call of the Wild makes 13.2. My Hero Academia Heroes Rising made $5 million, which is a huge statement for something for a project like that. And Bad Boys for Life crosses the $400 million mark. by far the biggest hit of the franchise, by making another $4.3 million this weekend, hanging out in the top 5. How about that role Will Smith is on? Makes a $1 billion film, comes out, does a Bad Boys, makes the biggest Bad Boys box office film ever. He's on a nice little roll right now. Anyway, what does this mean for the Monsters universe moving forward? I'll be honest with you, Rob. I have never, going into this movie, I never really considered this a part of, or what even could be considered a part of a Monsters universe in Universal. I know historically, the Invisible Man has been counted amongst the canon of the monster universe, the dark universe as they would call it. But I've always felt that this one was a little bit different. It felt different, especially from the trailers. It really didn't seem like a monster movie per se. And having watched the film, without giving any spoilers away, I still don't feel like it's a monster film. I still don't feel that way. It's more of a sci-fi thriller horror than anything else. But I don't know that I would call it a monster film per se. But then again, getting to the bigger topic about Blumhouse continues to show Hollywood. I can dig into my winter coat pockets, find $17 and make a movie that makes $30 million. And why can't you? Why can't you, rest of Hollywood? I mean, not every movie can be made for $7 million. You can't make Infinity War for $30 million, okay? Right. You can't make Endgame for $40 million. You can't make a Star Wars film for $16 million. I get that, but I also have thoroughly believed you do not need $200 million to do it. You don't need $200 million to do it. There have been other films that have proved you don't need to spend that much money. And again, Rob, whenever I bring that up and how frustrated I get seeing how Hollywood has let its spending get out of control, somebody will inevitably say to me, but John, it's not your money, so why do you care? Because those increased expenses, Hollywood passes the buck to you. They pass on the expense to you. That's why we see the ticket prices at movies continuing to go up and up and up and up, because Hollywood needs to make more and more of your money to justify spending that type of cash. At any rate, we're going off on a side topic here. The bottom line is, this movie's really good. This movie's really, really good. I so thoroughly enjoyed this film, Rob. I had such a good time with it. And it's always great to see a filmmaker like this take a small, reasonable budget, make a great film, and then be rewarded for making a great film with an outcome like this. Anyway, Rob, you're looking at this situation. What do you think about it?
Well, first of all, studios will say, yeah, but if we spend $200 million on a Fast and Furious movie, we're going to make $1 billion worldwide. And I would say that's true. But, you need to cultivate new talent. And what's wrong with making lower budget movies? Can you imagine if you were to make 10 movies for $7 million a year this movie could end up making $100 million on a $7 million spend worldwide. That is a huge return, and that's good business. And it's also a good way to foster new talent. I mean, Blumhouse they're crushing it. They got two more Halloween movies coming out. They're doing, it's really smart business. And if not every movie they make is going to be perfect, but they're really cultivating. I feel like we're back in the early 80s where you'd see, like, whether it was John Landis making a movie or David Cronenberg making a movie or Joe Dante or John Carpenter. You got these really interesting visions, and it would cement the careers of these filmmakers that we'd watch for the next 2 or 3 decades. And I think they're doing really, really good business. And, Lee Wanell will hone his craft as a filmmaker. And by the time he ends up helming a $200 million blockbuster, he'll crush it. And we're seeing people like Chris McQuarrie, who started out making movies like Way of the Gun. He comes back and he did a Jack Reacher movie, and now he's doing the Mission Impossible films. And it gives a filmmaker a chance to really learn and grow and become exciting filmmakers. And I think what it does is it bodes well. It's good business for Blumhouse, good business for Universal, and it's good business for the future of filmmaking. And I think it's great. Why aren't all the studios doing this? I don't know.
I agree. So question here is, guys, first of all, did you have a chance to see The Invisible Man? If so, what did you think of it? What do you think about its box office results, considering how little it spent to make it? Jump down to the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, with that down and out of the way, let's move on to main topic number 2. And our second main topic today gets submitted to us by Greg Phillips, who writes, "Hey, John. First of all, I loved your Anatomy of a Fake Movie Story video that you did earlier. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. I got to show you guys my incredible art skills. Okay, with your video in mind, did you see the reports about Ben Stiller possibly being in Fast 9? The report comes from Page 6 in the UK, which isn't the absolute most reliable source, but it's also not a bad one. Do you think Stiller will actually be in F9, and what do you think about his appearing in it?" All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, Greg. And so what Greg's referring to, yesterday on Open Mic, I did this little bit of a breakdown called The Anatomy of a Fake Movie Story. And basically, we charted out, and I used my incredible artist skills to break down, this is how most of these fake movie news stories get started. They start with an unknown website that nobody's ever heard of and would normally just ignore. But then the first aggregator, like a Screen Rant or something, will go, ooh, we can run that as a story. And then they run it. And then since they ran it, 15 other sites will run it because, ooh, now it's starting to look legitimate because it's on Screen Rant or Movie Web or whatever, starting to look legitimate. So then 15 other sites run it. And then you get the movie fan who is seeing 15, 20, 30, 50, 70 websites running the story, and therefore it looks kind of legitimate. And we went through that whole process. So now comes this story that Ben Stiller is going to appear in Fast 9, a movie I believe they've wrapped filming on. I'm not certain. But Page 6, as you mentioned, is not exactly the most reliable source. But at the same time, it's not always wrong. You know what I mean? It's got quasi reliability. So it's at least worth looking at and discussing about whether or not this could be true. So let's take a look at this. This is what Page 6 said in a very, very short story that they wrote on this. In what would be a fascinating casting decision, Page 6 is told that Ben Stiller will have a role in the latest installment of the Fast and the Furious franchise. Even though the Zoolander star isn't exactly known for his high-octane petrol-head performances, we're told that Stiller is due to begin shooting scenes for F9 soon. It seems likely that it'll be a small part. All right, so that comes to us from Page 6. I think there are a couple of reasons to believe that this is not true, and I think there are a couple of reasons to believe that maybe it is true. So let's talk first here, Rob, about why this probably maybe isn't true. Number one, they shot the movie. The movie's shot. I mean, so there's that. It seems a little late in the game to be adding somebody like a Ben Stiller to something like this. Number two, if Ben Stiller, who is still a very big name in this business, was going to appear in this film, you'd think the people to break the story would not have been Page 6. We probably would have heard of this from somewhere else by now. And number three, it just seems a little bit like one of those little too interesting to be true. A little too interesting to be true kind of stories. So there's that. On the other hand, there are a couple of reasons to maybe consider this could be true. If we look back at Hobbs and Shaw and say Ryan Reynolds' appearance in that, well, they hid his appearance in that movie pretty damn well. I had no idea Ryan Reynolds was in that movie until I saw that movie. I had no idea. So they were able to keep that secret. Maybe they could do this. Number two, if it is a very small role, like say a Kevin Hart appearance in Hobbs and Shaw or something like that, then it probably is something you could squeeze into some reshoot dates. If it's just a scene or two, you could easily fit those in, and a scene or two that don't necessarily affect the entire plot of the movie, you could probably pretty easily slide him in there and make that happen. So, I don't know. On the one hand, and again, Hobbs and Shaw just did that with Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart. Why couldn't another Fast and the Furious universe movie, like a Fast 9, do something like that with a Ben Stiller and maybe either one or two others? So it leaves me in a place, Rob, that I don't know if this is true. I don't know, but I do believe there are some possibilities here to suggest that maybe it could be, and some possibilities to suggest that maybe it's not. Rob, you hear about this whole situation. Do you think this is something that could be true? Is this consistent? Do you think this is actually going to be what's happening? What are your thoughts?
I mean, sure, it could absolutely be true. And I don't necessarily think, for me, the one person that I care about being in Fast 9, he's in it. And I don't care.
Yes.
I don't care if Ben Stiller's in it or not. If he plays a good role, I think he could be funny. I think he could add to the surprise. But I don't necessarily think these movies need those kinds of things. Hobbs and Shaw was so goofy that, I think having Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart worked for the film. It depends what he's playing. If he brings something unique and they've written him a good role, I'd say okay. That's all I want is, believe it or not, I still want my Fast 8, as much as I love these movies, when they're trying to outdrive a torpedo on the ice and there's nuclear, I'm like, it's hard for me, John. It's hard for me to go back to the heights of Fast 5. But look, as long as it's good, as long as he's good in it, I say bring it on. I can't wait.
Rob, didn't you see the trailer for the new one? He swings a car from a vine. Rob,
dude,
verisimilitude.
Yeah, I know.
All bets are up. Listen, question here is, guys, you hear this Ben Stiller rumor / report coming from a 50-50 kind of a source. There's some reasons to believe that maybe it could be real, some reasons to believe it's not. I don't know where this leaves me. I honestly don't know if I believe it or not. What do you guys think? Do you think it'd be an interesting thing for them? Would you like to see Ben Stiller pop up in there? Do you believe it? Do you not? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With that down and out of the way, let's move on to main topic number 3. And our third main topic today gets submitted to us by Kyle, who writes, "Hey, John. So I just read an article from Screen Rant about the novelization of The Rise of Skywalker stating Palpatine's mind just went into a clone and that's how he survived now. This completely retcons what the visual dictionary said, and it's giving me a headache thinking about which is canon. What are your thoughts on this? Thanks." All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, for those of you who may have missed this over the weekend, now, the novelization for the Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker has come out. Now, it's not actually publicly available yet, but as they've done in times past, they actually released a bunch of copies of it at a festival this past weekend, and some excerpts from that novelization have now, or obviously being shared. One of the excerpts from the novel that got released, it happens during one of those opening scenes in the movie when Kylo Ren finds Palpatine, and it starts saying, "What could you offer me?" Like talking to Palpatine. This is from the novelization. It reads as follows. "What could you give me?" Kylo asked. Emperor Palpatine lived after a fashion, and Kylo could feel in his very bones that this clone body sheltered the Emperor's actual spirit. It was an imperfect vessel, though, unable to contain his immense power. It couldn't last much longer. And Kylo could feel in his very bones that this clone body sheltered the Emperor's actual spirit. Okay. So, what the novelization of Star Wars is saying is that the way the Emperor survived was that he was a clone. Okay. This is the frustrating thing to me. It's not the clone idea. The clone idea doesn't frustrate me. I am not a fan of the idea of them making this a clone. I'm not a fan of the idea in principle. Like if you had rewound the clock 6 months and told me, oh, by the way Palpatine survived, the way he is back, they do it via cloning. I wouldn't have been a big fan of that in principle, but fine, whatever. As long as you explain how the hell Palpatine is back. There are certain details in movies we don't have to know. There are certain details you do have to know. And when you set up the big sacrifice of Darth Vader throwing Palpatine down to the ditch, the Death Star blowing up and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden he's back, that's something you got to explain. You got to explain that. And they didn't. They didn't. Their explanation, as our friend Christian Harloff once said, their explanation was on how is Palpatine back? Because. That's it. That was their explanation in the movie. And that was frustrating that they didn't, but the implied message in the movie with that simple because message, the implied message was he just did. He survived it. His body is broken. He's falling apart. He's never been the same, but he survived it. Then, Rob, digging their own hole deeper, Lucasfilm puts out the visual dictionary of The Rise of Skywalker. You remember this, Rob? They put out the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary, and they just started digging their hole even deeper when they get into this, there are these guys called the Sith Eternals. What the fuck are you talking about, Sith Eternals? Yeah, they were the Guns N' Roses fans in the stadium where Palpatine was. Yeah, they're called Sith Eternals. Why the fuck didn't you tell us that in the movie? Oh, we don't know. We just kind of overlooked that. And you see, says the visual dictionary, yeah, they gathered up Palpatine from what? The Death Star blew up in outer space or whatever. The Guns N' Roses fan club came along, and you see, this is the visual dictionary. They gathered up Palpatine, brought him back to Exegol, and through all their explanation in the visual dictionary was they used a mixture of science and the occult to keep him alive, right? That's in there. Nothing in the visual dictionary remotely suggests that it's a clone. Because if he's a clone, and if the people writing the visual dictionary knew he was a clone, you would think, just logic dictates, you would write down, and it was a clone body. But they didn't do that. There's no mention of him being a clone in the movie. That's a kind of a significant point. There's no mention of him being a clone, even in the fucking Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary. There's still, they mentioned the Guns N' Roses fans, and they mentioned the occult, and they mentioned a lot of vague things, but they just leave it at that. And now, continuing to dig, Lucasfilm pulls another 180, and in the novelization say, he's a clone. And his body's just withering because the spirit of the Emperor is so powerful that a physical human body can't possibly take it. Look, again, this is not me as a Star Wars fan being upset about the idea of them using a clone. I wouldn't have liked the idea, but if that was the plan from the beginning, okay, you're going the direction of the clone. Make something out of it. Make something good happen out of it. Even though I don't like the idea, make something good happen out of it. Go for it. But they've done this and this and this and this and turned left and turned right, and now they just keep digging the ditch. And they keep trying to pretend, Rob, this is the frustrating thing for me. They keep trying to pretend like canon still matters to them, when clearly it doesn't. They made a big deal, and I know you guys have heard me whine and bitch and complain about this before, but please indulge me as I whine and bitch and moan and complain about it a little bit more. When they took this thing over, they said, everything's canon now. Moving forward from this day on, everything's canon. If it's in the comic, it's canon. If it's in a book, it's canon. If it's in the movie, obviously, it's canon. If it's in a video game, it's canon. And then some things start happening in video games. Well, they're like, okay, well, maybe it's not the video games. Then we start to see some contradictions in some of the novels. And like, well, okay, it's canon as long as it doesn't contradict. It's like, I feel like Han Solo. That's not how canon works. And now they're doing this thing like no mention of him being a clone in the movie, completely suggesting something else in the visual dictionary. And now the novel comes up. And Rob, I understand the amount of virgin nerdness that I have to have in me to let something like this bother me is astounding. I know. I completely acknowledge that. It's so ridiculous that something as stupid as this gets me riled up. But it just goes to me again, it just goes to show, while I have liked almost all the movies they've put out, except for Rise of Skywalker, this is just another situation to me, again, that shows they don't know what the hell they're doing behind the scenes. That over there, it is a complete madhouse behind the scenes. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. They can't get themselves together. And it goes, Rob, to the biggest criticism that a lot of people have had. And that biggest criticism has had, there has been no consistent plan. They've lucked out and made a great Force Awakens movie, and some other Rogue One was great, and they made a few other movies that were likable, some not. Some people like them, some people, whatever. But behind the scenes, the biggest criticism has been, you guys have had no plan. And this, to me, this whole, where we're doing it this way in the movie, and then the visual dictionary saying something else, and then the novel saying something else, and by the way, we're still towing this BS line that it's all canon, it just goes to reemphasize the fact that they don't know what they're doing. They have no direction. They have no plan. They're flying by the seat of their pants. And yeah, they've put out some movies that I've really, really liked. But if you don't have your shit together behind the scenes, it's eventually going to catch up to you. And now we're just seeing it blossom into a huge fart flower. And it's just stenching up the room. And it's bothering me, dude. It is bothering me. I don't know. Maybe, again, the amount of virgin nerdness is in such display right now. I get it, I am, but I don't know, Rob, you see this. Am I making too big of a deal out of this? I probably am. But what do you think about this?
I don't think you're making a big deal about it at all, because I think that the powers that be that are running these large franchises that have, these movies are Star Wars and Star Trek are a unique breed of film and a unique breed of franchise in that they have these extended universes with comic books, with video games, with visual dictionaries, and the fan base, the people that are paying the money that have made these things so successful, look at these things and pore over them. And it's part of why these franchises are successful in the first place. And when you have creators now that are spending less and less time paying attention to all this stuff, it does in fact seem like it's a slap in the face to fans. It really is. You're basically disrespecting your audience by doing things like this. And when it comes down to it, it's like, oh, so when they it's very disappointing to think that when they decided to throw or shoehorn Palpatine into this movie, that they didn't even bother. And I blame J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio for this, because they were the credited writers on the movie. Obviously, they didn't use a lot of the ideas that were in the Duel of the Fates script. They used some of them, but they created this problem. And they don't even have their own answer. It's certainly not in the movie. But if you bring Palpatine back, J.J. Abrams, like so many of his other films, it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. He'll just show up. But with a franchise like this, it does matter. Because, then the future filmmakers that have to work in the Star Wars universe, whether you're working on a show or another movie, or novelists or video game creators, they're all asking themselves, because they have to deal with logic questions in the work they do, how did this happen? And could it happen again? And when there is no reason and there is no understanding and there is no, they've got three different places, the movie, the visual dictionary, and now this novelization that say three different things, and none of them make any sense. And it's like, well, then why should we care? Why should we invest our time and our money and our patience and our souls in what you're turning out if you don't care enough to figure it out? And that's the problem that a lot of these franchises, I think, are suffering from now. These newer creators come in and they think, well, what does it matter? We don't have to explain it. Yeah, you do. You do. Because part of the appeal of these universes is the fact that there's so much lore. We all love our lore. And make sure our lore works, it somehow holds together. I think
I just... Again, to me, I make no apologies that I love The Force Awakens. I love the movie. I'm passionately love the movie. I make no apologies that I love Rogue One. I love that movie. Yep. I make no apologies that I really enjoyed Solo. I make no apologies for that. I make no apologies that I really liked the Last Jedi. There are certainly things about it that I did not like. Undoubtedly, there are things about that movie I don't like, but there's things about it that I love. I make no apologies. If you don't like those movies, that's cool. That's great. If you don't like that I like those movies, fuck yourself with a cactus. I don't care. But even while this is going on, I have for a couple of years now, Rob, and I've been talking to you about it. I said, look, it just makes me nervous. The movies we're getting right now, until Rise of Skywalker, which I didn't like, the movies we've been getting up till now have been working for me and everything, but it's been so overwhelmingly concerning seeing the lack of leadership behind the scenes with all the directors coming and going, the writers coming and going, and me asking the question, listen, your number one job as a head of a studio is to make sure you've got the right filmmakers in place and you're aligned with their vision and they're aligned with yours. And clearly we're seeing you drop the ball over and over again. And while somebody from the outside can look at this situation, Rob, and say, well, this is relatively a minor thing, to me, it's a systemic symptom, if you will, of what is the larger problem behind the scenes. That this is indicative, Rob. A little thing like this, and I admit it's a small detail, but a little thing like this with this whole, the Palpatine thing is one thing in the movie, it's another thing in the visual dictionary, now it's another thing in the movie. This is indicative of an operation that behind the scenes has been unable to know where they want to go, to properly track out what their path is, not just story-wise in the movie, but philosophy-wise behind the scenes as an overall franchise. This, to me, just kind of highlights all of that, and it frustrates me. It frustrates me to no end. And who knows, maybe we'll have to see things. Question here is, guys, what do you think about the Palpatine thing? Am I just overwhelmingly overreacting to this? I will admit there is a large possibility of that. Or maybe I'm not. How do you guys think about it? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, and I'm sure we'll get to more of that in the live questions in just a little bit. I'm sure we'll talk more about this Star Wars thing in the live questions. But for now, let's move on to main topic number 4. And our fourth main topic today gets submitted to us by Fabian C., who writes, "Hi, John. So the Suicide Squad just wrapped filming. It's supposed to release in August of 2021. It's currently only March of 2020. That is 15 months from now. Do you think it could get a release date bump? Maybe to June? Thank you." All right. Thanks a lot for sending in that question, man. And yes, James Gunn just recently jumped on his social media in a very heartwarming kind of message he sent out to the fans about the fact that they have indeed wrapped shooting on Suicide Squad. I still call it Suicide Squad 2. I guess it's just the Suicide Squad. And he sent out this very heartwarming message saying, just before we started filming, my dad died. Just before we finished filming, my dog of 17 years passed away. But he said it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of his career making this movie. He just felt a lot of love. He says his cast has been fantastic, blah, blah. Really love making this film. But you do raise a good point. We are nearly a year and a half away from the release date of this film. Could they step up and bump up the release date since the shooting? I mean, obviously they still have a lot of post-production work to do, but could they bump up the release date and move it? Here's the one thing that I would suggest that we really do got to keep in mind about movies like Suicide Squad when it's done shooting, but the release date is still a far ways away. And that thing that we've got to keep in mind is this. When they are planning shoots for movies like this, they have line producers and they have people who plan to the minute, 6 months out, what each day of shooting is going to be. And sometimes they fall behind, but they know exactly what they're shooting, at which location, what props they're going to need, what personnel they're going to need. They plan all that stuff out so they can budget down to the last dollar, how much they're going to take and all that kind of stuff. When they started shooting this movie, Rob, they already knew when it was going to finish shooting. When they started shooting the movie, they knew exactly when it was going to finish shooting. It's not like James Gunn put out this announcement saying we've wrapped shooting and the people at the studio going, wait a minute, what? We didn't think you're going to be done for another 5 months. Well, maybe we should change the release date. So the reason I don't think they're going to move the date is because they knew a year ago when they were going to shoot, when shooting would be done, and when their release date is. And they just chose that their release date that they feel is best for their movie is that August date. So while it is absolutely possible, it's possible they could change the date if they want, just like it's possible for any movie to change their date. Because this is probably all part of the plan, I don't suspect that they will change the date. Rob, you're seeing this. Are you surprised there's this much of a gap between the end of principal photography and the release of the film? And do you suspect that maybe they'll go ahead and change the release date?
Well, no. I mean, as we know now, a lot of these films, they finish principal photography and it's another year before they come out in the theaters. I mean, some movies are quicker, but if you have an effects heavy film, or there's a lot of post work that needs to be done. And there's also, now remember, movies are getting released worldwide these days. So films, sometimes they have to be dubbed, they have to be subtitled, and there's a lot of work that goes in. So for me, a year-long post-production schedule is not unusual. And also people have to remember that, sometimes you've got thousands of people working on the post on these movies in terms of visual effects all over the world. And it takes time. It just takes time. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
All right, guys, question here is, now that they've wrapped the principal photography, I'm sure they're going to have reshoots. They always plan to have reshoots for these things, so I'm sure that's coming. But do you think maybe there's a strong possibility that they could move up the release date? And do you even care about it? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys, with that down and out of the way, let's move on to the fifth and final main topic today. And our fifth and final main topic today gets submitted to us by Darren James Lewis, who writes, "Hello, fellow movie fans. I grew up as a big Star Trek fan, watching Next Generation since I was a kid. I love almost everything Star Trek, original series, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, the new movies, Discovery, and I'm loving Picard so far. So it was with a broken heart that I heard Simon Pegg say he believes there will be no more Star Trek movies. What did you think of his comments, and do you agree?" All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, Darren. And yes, I am also, I am not the biggest Star Trek fan on this show, but I am also a Star Trek fan. And much like you, I grew up, because my mom liked Star Trek a lot. So I grew up with the old original series, the reruns of the original series playing in my house all the time. So I got onto that. And of course, I loved Star Wars as a kid. So I love science fiction. So I really got into Star Trek too, and blah, 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 blah. And I, for one, maybe the only one on this show right now, I loved the JJ era Star Trek movies. I really like them. I like them a lot. But it is starting to look like we're not going to get any more. And Simon Pegg kind of stepped up and kind of made the suggestion that they might be done making those movies. Here's what Pegg had to say. "The fact is, Star Trek movies don't make Marvel money. They make maybe $500 million at the most. And to make one now on the scale they've set themselves is a $200 million movie," which kind of goes back around to what we were talking about earlier, Rob. "You have to make 3 times that to make a profit. And we've lost momentum. I think losing Anton Yelchin was a huge blow." Of course, remember the guy, actor Anton Yelchin passed away. "I think losing Anton was a huge blow to our little family, and our enthusiasm to do another one might have been affected by that. So I don't know." All right. Piggybacking on that, what Simon is talking about is, yes, despite the fact that the last 3 Star Trek movies have been financially the biggest successes that Star Trek has had, the reality is they don't make what a lot of us would consider blockbuster money. They have blockbuster budgets, they have blockbuster expectations, but they don't make blockbuster money. The first Star Trek movie under that reign made $385 million. Of course, that was liked by a lot of people, so we expected the second one to go up because a lot of people liked that first one, and it did go up, $467 million. However, a lot of people didn't like that second one. I did. I liked the second one, and not as much as the first. And there was certainly some dumb stuff about it. But we went into the third film, which I thought was the best of the bunch. I thought the third Star Trek film, Star Trek Beyond, was actually the best of the bunch out of these 3, but it only managed to pull together $343 million. When you're talking about making huge scale sci-fi epics that do cost $170+ million to make, or at least by the studio's rationale, you have to spend that much money. That simply doesn't cut it. That simply doesn't cut it. With them having more and more success on television, it does start to feel like maybe the days of these movies are gone. I mean, all that momentum, Rob, that we heard about Quentin Tarantino's going to do Star Trek film, all that seems to be gone now. So that seems to have disappeared and evaporated into the ether. The idea of this type of a movie and that, and we hear other things, but it really does seem like their focus right now is on television, and maybe that's where it should be. Rob, I know you've got your theories and opinions about the current state of Star Trek and things like that. But specifically when you're listening to, Simon Pegg's comments, they say, look, they want movies that are going to cost this much, but these movies don't make that much. I don't know. Do you think there's a future, an immediate future, like within the next 5, 6, 7 years for more Star Trek? And how do you assess that?
Well, first of all, as anybody who ever did any cursory glance into the past of Star Trek in the theater, theatrically released Star Trek, they've always kept their budgets down, with the exception of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which had to deal with the development costs of previously aborted Star Trek shows and movies. That's why the budget was expensive. They really kept the budgets down. For Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, they brought in Harve Bennett from the television department at Paramount, and they made those movies basically on TV budgets, and they were successful. Star Trek has never traveled well internationally. It's never done huge business internationally. And what they should have done, I thought, during the J.J. Abrams era, I thought it was incredibly irresponsible to make Star Trek movies at the budget level that they were making Star Trek movies at, because they were trying to force a round peg into a square hole, or a square peg into a round hole, in the sense that they were spending, even the first Star Trek movie, the reported budget was between $140 and $175 million. Well, as we saw, as you just put up, a movie has to make 3 times its budget to be considered profitable. And it was nowhere near that. None of the Star Trek movies were nowhere near that, because they spent too much damn money on them. And their Star Trek and they have not spent, they've spent way too much money on the new TV shows as well. And I think it's really irresponsible to expect a franchise like Star Wars to suddenly become a franchise like a Star Trek, to become like Star Wars, because there's no evidence to support that it can. And if they had started out making the first Star Trek movie with the new cast at 80 million or 100 million, then they would have had something. But instead, they had to spend money, and Into Darkness was way more expensive than it was even reported. They have to spend a lot more money marketing these movies, and they basically killed their own franchise, because they did not make them in line with what Star Trek has made in the past. And why they thought Star Trek would suddenly become like doing Transformers numbers, I don't know. But I think Star Trek will come back one day, and I think that what they're going to have to do is figure out a way to not make... Remember, Star Trek was never a franchise that relied on special effects. It was all about characters and story. Look at one of the most successful movies was The Voyage Home, where the crew went back in time. It was an epic time travel story, but most of it, they shot a lot of it on location in San Francisco, and it was all about the character interaction and the situation, and there really were hardly any special effects. And it worked out really, really well for them, and it became one of the most beloved Star Trek movies. And that's something you got to remember.
Yeah, I struggle with it. I struggle with it because on the one hand, look, you and I have had this discussion before. Star Trek was dying. Before the J.J. Abrams appear, all the box office numbers and all of them drooped down. The popularity of the last few shows all dripped down. I get that Paramount was probably at a place that thought, we need a transformative moment for Star Trek to appeal to a new generation, the next generation, a new generation of fans. And we feel like the lore of Star Trek is so rich and so good that we feel that if we can incorporate that into a blockbuster style thing, that maybe we can make this the next big franchise. I thought the first film was a good start. And while I liked Into Darkness, it had a lot of problems, and there were a lot of people, both fans of the old Star Trek and fans of the new Star Trek, didn't like the film all that much. And I thought that that derailed their progress, because we saw an uptick in the box office. But I think because that was a very divisive film, that kind of made it take a step backwards. Not to mention that first trailer, Rob, I don't know if you remember the first trailer for Star Trek Beyond, the third film. It was horrible. Like that first trailer for Star Trek, and you and I have been talking a lot in the recent months about how first trailers are becoming, I believe, more and more important, because you don't get a second chance to make a good first impression. And it just felt like they lost. And then, of course, the passing of Anton Yelchin. which did that struck a really solid blow as well. And it's just, and then they said they were going to do another one with Chris Hemsworth coming in, and then all things about they realized they can't make the movies for that much money anymore, so they can't pay everybody the big blockbuster salaries, and Hemsworth and Pine pull out, and then it's just been a mess. And honestly, Rob, I don't know, because look, I'll be frank with you. I do not think the answer for Star Trek now is to go back to the way Star Trek was. I don't think that's the answer, but clearly the current path, particularly theatrically, hasn't worked either. Let me put you in the hot seat here. You're an executive at Paramount. You know, your buddy Bob Iger left Disney, so you jumped ship and you went to Paramount. So you're at Paramount now, and they just say, guys, spitball, where do we go with Star Trek? What do we do philosophically with Star Trek now to try to get this thing back on the right path? What do you suggest to them?
Well, I would take a page out of what worked in Star Trek in the past. You know, when they did the series, it went off the air in 1969. In 1979, they released Star Trek the Motion Picture with the same cast, but moving into the future. The characters are now entering middle age. Then they jumped ahead almost 100 years and created Next Generation. They kept moving forward. Since 2009, we've gotten a Star Trek going back in time with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, 3 movies retreading old ground. Star Trek Discovery is a prequel to the original series, again, before Star Trek started with before the original series. And now we're going back to Star Trek The Next Generation. We're going back to the TNG, which came out in 1987 originally. What Star Trek needs is it needs something new. You need to come out and show us something that has really no ties. You move forward into the universe. You reinvent the concept for today. You don't go back and try and retcon or try and reimagine what we've already had before. And that's what's, I think, hampered Star Trek, is that they haven't done something new. And what you do is you either do a complete reboot and use the same concepts and things and start over from scratch, or you do what Star Trek has been doing well, which is jumping ahead in the future. Now, they're trying to do that with Picard, but it's so steeped in Star Trek lore. I mean, you've got Seven of Nine, and you've got the Borg, and you've got Hugh, and it's, if you've never watched Star Trek before, Picard is not a great place for you to jump on because it's so locked into what's come before. But if you were to come up with all new characters, and you've got the universe already, but take Star Trek into the future and make it relevant to this time. Don't try and, again, shoehorn what's been in the past of Star Trek to make it for today, because what you do is you alienate people that are watching Star Trek going, well, that's not exactly how these characters used to be. And then now, you know, they're trying to throw in bad language and horrible violence. So it's no longer a family show. I mean, to think Picard is not a show you've had murder in every episode. People have been straight up beheaded in Star Trek episodes. If there was beheadings on Star Trek when I was watching it as a kid, my parents wouldn't have let me watch it. And look where it's like, I don't know what they're trying to do. Who is Star Trek for now? Again, like with Star Wars, I don't think they really know.
I think you raise an interesting point, because you sound a lot like me when I'm talking about Star Wars, is that I want Star Wars to move forward. Enough with the prequel stuff, enough of the young version of this and that, move forward. Maybe that's the answer in this stuff. Guys, question is, what do you make of this whole situation? Do you think we're going to get another Star Trek movie in the next 5 years or so? Starting to look like we're not. And what do you think the answer for them is philosophically at this point? Maybe you feel like it's going back to the old ways. Maybe you think it's like going back to the JJ ways. Maybe you think it's a time for something completely new like Rob is suggesting. Jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys. That will wrap it up for all of our main topics today. We're now going to jump over and start taking your guys' live questions. We got a whole bunch lined up. Now, before we do, though, Rob and I are going to do what we do every day. We're going to take a short couple of minute break here. Give me a chance to stretch the legs, rest the vocal cords, refill the drink, give you a chance to run and use the bathroom yourself. So if you guys will hang tight with us, don't go anywhere. Rob and I will be right back. We'll see you in just a couple of minutes. are back. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience and indulgence as we took just a little bit of a break there to get things going. And now let's keep things rolling with the live questions. Now, how do you send in live questions for the John Campea Show? Well, there's two ways to do it. The best way to do it is you can use the tip link that's in the top line of the description of this video, or you can see it right here. That's streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. You can go there, leave a tip to support the channel, and you can send in a question, or you can just use the super chat feature here on YouTube. The neat thing is, if you want to send in a question, you can send it in anytime 24/7 using this link, and it'll be one of the first questions that gets answered on the next day's show, or you can send it in live now. It's all up to you. All right, with that down, let's get into the live questions today. And we're going to start off our live questions today with an anonymous writer who writes in, "Hi, everyone. I never knew Tom Holland / Spider-Man was a dancer. Somebody showed me his performance in the lip sync battle show, and it was amazing. Gymnastics, dancing, and very committed performance. Good speaker, too. He could do very good on Saturday Night Live." Listen, I'll tell you what. You are talking about the rap or the lip sync battle he did with Zendaya. And he did the song Umbrella, Rob, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was, he did Umbrella. That, I remember we talked about it on the show when that happened, because when I saw that, I was like, this kid is fearless. This Tom Holland dude, first of all, he's a wicked dancer. He's really good, and he's got charisma, and he was totally fearless, and he just went all out on that. And I'll tell you what, I was already a fan. I was a casual fan of Tom Holland at that point. I became a huge fan of Tom Holland after seeing that. Did you see that that lip sync battle they did?
Oh yeah, no, it was great. I mean, he's an incredibly talented dude. I mean, he's been on stage and screen, and he knows how to move, and I love that. It was great.
Yeah, it was real enjoyable. Okay, we move on here. Michael Bradley writes, The Invisible Man, Elizabeth Moss, was incredible and had a few nice twists, but too many eye-rolling moments. Also, the police made the Gotham PD from Batman 89 look like Hawaii Five-0. I disagree. I mean, listen, we're going to be very careful not to get any spoilers here, but, I mean, this was supposed to be, Rob, to borrow your term, a verisimilitude situation of police and what is normally going on in our world. And everybody's faced with a very unlikely scenario. And so I had no problem with it. Were there a couple of eye-rolling moments? Yes. And if we were doing a spoiler discussion, I would go into them. There were a couple, but overall, I thought the tension of it, Elizabeth Moss's performance was bonkers good. So I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Rob, I know you did too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding? What's not to love?
Yeah, I just thought it was solid. So solid all the way through. All right, Willow writes, you should do more drawings on your show. Of course, going back to that whole anatomy of a fake movie news yesterday, I pulled out the eye. I was doing drawing on it. Woo, it's real bad. You should do more drawings on your show. Your sketch of the typical film fan with the big bulging eyes, wide open mouth, and skimpy hair is so photorealistic. It's like looking in the mirror. You know what? Let me see if I can find this. I don't know if I can, but let me see if I can dig this up, because somebody took a screenshot of the sketch I did. And let me see if it's still here. Oh my gosh, here it is. Let me see if I can pull it onto screen here. Okay. Let's get it on screen. I will pull this up. Here it is. This is the sketch that I drew. This was a part of a larger overall chart and diagram, and the last stage was, and then you got the film fan, and I just drew this film fan, which is, yeah. I think I missed my calling, Rob. I think I missed my calling. I think I should have been in art. Thank you for the kind words, Willow. All right, James L.H. writes, Hi, John. Seen Invisible Man. Really enjoyed it. I actually didn't see the trailers, which surprised me only because I had heard you say it revealed a bit much at the time, so I didn't know if it did. Tuesday, seeing Ruffalo in Dark Waters. Yeah, nice choice. Yeah, so one of my thoughts, Rob, coming out of Invisible Man was, you've heard me say about the trailers. Man, the trailers give too much away.
Right.
This was one of those situations where then I watched the movie and went, it actually didn't give too much away, to be honest with you. Once I saw the movie, it kind of changed my feeling. That how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I like that. You don't have to, or even I like when trailers sort of even misdirect. They leave out pertinent information that maybe they could have told you but didn't, about the actual situation and what's actually going on, that I found interesting. Like, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And that's exciting. Like when you're watching a movie and things don't work out the way you want them to.
Or suspect they would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dug it. I really did. Okay. James L.H. writes a two-parter, one of two. Curious to see Wahlberg in Netflix's Spencer. Like, who is involved, but also has nostalgia, as I remember me and my late mom watching Spencer for Hire with Robert Ulrich in the 1980s on BBC. They used to show it late night, so I would record it on VHS. Imagine a VHS. Also, this was when the UK only had 4 channels to watch before cable, satellite, then streaming. Spencer was my first exposure to Avery Brooks and this cool character, Hawk, and why at the time I looked forward to seeing him as Cisco on DS9. Rob, this kind of came up a few days ago. Somebody mentioned this, the new Wahlberg thing, and I'm very unfamiliar with Spencer or Spencer for Hire. So I'm the wrong guy to comment on this, but what do you make of this whole thing?
Well, I've read some things that people are already all up in arms about it. I haven't seen it. I don't know if the movie has dropped on Netflix yet, but I saw the trailer for it and I liked what I saw, but I haven't read the original books but I have fond memories of the TV show, and I don't think it's going to be, until I see it, no, it's terrible. I can't say anything, but I thought it was intriguing. Like, I thought it was cool that they're going back. I love when anybody goes back and adapts literary properties. I'm a huge fan of seeing books translated into entertainment. So we'll see. I mean, I want it to be great, John. I want it to be great.
What was the basic idea of the original show?
Well, you had this guy from a questionable background who was helping people in need, and he had his buddy Hawk, who was a badass. And they would go right wrongs.
Sounds a little bit like Equalizer. Sounds a little bit like the old
it was a little
Equalizer.
Different than that. It was a little, but it's that general idea.
All right.
And
And listen, if it already dropped on Netflix, it would just be par for the course for how well Netflix lets people know about stuff on their own network. All right, next up, Suthius writes, "Hey guys, not a question or a comment, but a memory. My first and only email to be chosen for main topics discussion for any of the shows, this one being AMC, was on September 4th, 2013. I looked it up and it's still there. Topic was, what if Feige was in charge of DC? I mean, that was always one of the big problems that we've always had and continue to have, is that, back in those days and today, I'll literally get 100-200, sometimes more messages a day, but I can only pick 4 or 5. So that means there's a lot of times people will send in stuff and they won't get one on the show. So it's really tricky and it's difficult, but that's awesome, Suthius, that you actually remember the date when yours got on the show. So that's great. So thank you for sharing that memory. All right. Film Boss writes, "Hey-yo, in the conversation for Best Actor turned Director, I feel like Sidney Pollack," actually, that's a good one. Tootsie, man. Tootsie. "Sidney Pollack is criminally overlooked and underrated. That mother effer directed 3 Days of the Condor, Out of Africa, and the greatest rom-com of all time, Tootsie. Love him." Listen, I was just talking the other day, Rob, about how one of the first big, great, fun theater experiences I had in Los Angeles when I moved here, I think it was in the first few weeks that I lived here, the ArcLight Cinema Dome had a special screening of Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman there. And Tootsie is one of the greatest comedies ever made. I to this day, I love that movie so much.
It's one of my favorite comedies of all time by far.
Oh, so good. But anyway, what do you think about Film Boss' thing about Sidney Pollack as maybe being an underrated dude from the actor turned director thing? By the way, I don't even know for sure which was he first. Like, I'm not even totally sure on that. What do you think?
Yeah, he'd been directing for a long time, but he was in obviously Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. I loved him in Tootsie playing Dustin Hoffman's agent. He's like, no one will hire you. I mean, he's so he's just so good. I don't know. He must have done acting first, but I'm not clear on that. But he was a great actor, and he was a terrific filmmaker. And Tootsie, if you haven't seen it, you think that, okay, it's got a high concept idea behind it, but it's actually a really down to earth. It's a very poignant and very sweet movie, but it's also it's very much a New York film as well, and that's what I really liked about it. And I could watch that movie over and over and over again. It's so funny. And Bill Murray has an uncredited cameo in it.
Yes, he does.
Hilarious.
And by
hilarious.
The way, movie that made me fall in love with Terry Garr. I love Terry Garr in that movie.
She's so good in it. She's so good in it. I'm responsible for my own orgasm.
Film Boss also writes 10 greatest classic remakes that aren't generally known as remakes. Ben-Hur, that's a good one. Titanic, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which there's another remake of it that just came out in theaters last year. Heat, The Revenant, The Birdcage, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Talented Mr. Ripley, True Lies. True Lies. That was a remake.
Was it? I don't know.
That proves film. If Film Boss is correct and talking about remakes that generally aren't known to be remakes, and that's a good one because I had no idea True Lies was remake. I'll have to look into that at some point. That's an interesting list, Film Boss. All right, next up, Mike C writes, "Hey John, I've been going through a lot the last few months and I'm currently in rehab." Well, first of all, listen, dude.
John, it is a remake.
It is a remake. It is
based on a 1991 French comedy called La Totale.
I did not know that. This is the great thing about the film fan community. I learn things from them every day. That's great. All right, we'll get back over to Mike's thing here now. Going through a lot lately, and currently I'm in rehab. Well, listen, first of all, Mike, let me just say this. Everybody has struggles. It takes a special kind of person to recognize they're having struggles and wants to take steps to do something about it. So good on you for being in rehab, dude. That's great. All right. I just watched The Shawshank Redemption for the first time. It was the perfect film to watch right now. It's my new all-time favorite film. Hope is a good thing. And, we've been talking a lot. I don't know why, but the last week or so, we've been talking a lot about Shawshank Redemption. And it is one of the, I think, 3 or 4 greatest motion pictures ever made. It's perfection. The film is utter perfection. It has everything in it. And it is, I think anybody going to film school day one, sit down, there are 2 films you got to watch. You got to watch The Godfather. You got to watch Shawshank Redemption. Now there's a lot of other films to watch later, but day one, those are the ones that you watch. It is just a utterly perfect movie. My one biggest complaint, like oftentimes, Rob, at the Academy Awards, the film that I want to win doesn't win Best Picture. That's fine. That's fine because there's a lot of great films. But I've never thought there was a greater injustice at the Academy Awards than the fact that Shawshank Redemption did not win Best Picture at the Academy Awards that year. And listen, a great film won Best Picture, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump won Best Picture that year. It's a great film. Don't get me wrong. It's a great film. But Shawshank Redemption is one of the greatest films ever made. But you're right, man. It's a message of hope. And that is what shines through. Somebody wrote in the other day, Rob, and asked, I got a friend of mine that doesn't want to watch Shawshank because they say they don't like prison movies. What would you say to them? And I said, what I would say to them is that while Shawshank Redemption, the name of the prison is right in the name of the movie, Shawshank. But Shawshank Redemption, the prison is simply the setting of the movie. This is a movie about the human spirit and about hope. It's a movie about hope. Even one of the greatest movie posters of all time is that Shawshank poster where you see him standing from behind with his arms reaching up to the heavens as the rain falls down. I get goosebumps just thinking about the image. It's a movie about hope, but it is really one of those things. Rob, your quick thoughts on Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, dude. Well, I read the original story every year. The original story is called Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. It appears in different seasons from 1982. And I would read it. I read that story every year at Christmas. And I was so excited about the film. I had a little bit of a connection to it. And I just thought it couldn't have been better. I've watched that movie countless times. The combination of the photography, it's Roger Deakins shot it. Frank Darabont, he'd made a TV movie before, but this was his first feature film. The music, the casting in this film, my God, everything about this is just superlative, and it just all works together. It's one of those truly magical movies, and anybody who wants to see it, it's not just about being in prison. That's just the milieu, but the story is about it's about a friendship that flourishes in a not a very nice environment, and a friendship that transcends everything. And it's such a wonderful film.
Find me in San Juaninejo. All right. Next up comes to us from Jay Bling, who writes, reading about the new Rise of Skywalker novelization that says Palpatine himself was a clone made me feel like they've just dug this hole of stupidity even further. I felt like Janice from Friends, not only with elation, oh my God. I mean, listen, I've already gone off on that about what I think about. Again, it's not the clone issue. If you had said that 6 months ago, that this is how Palpatine is back clone, I don't like the idea, but maybe you can make something of it. At least that's your idea and you're following through. This thing about they imply one thing in the movies, then they imply something different in the visual dictionary. And now in the novelization out of nowhere, they come out and say it's a clone. It just again shows to me the complete lack of direction. They're playing this by ear. They're reacting to every step along the way. It's not a way you run a movie studio, and it's getting frustrating. Murray Reich writes, how it should have ended on The Rise of Skywalker is awesome. Better ending than the actual movie. Well, how it should have ended is often quite awesome. I haven't seen their one for The Rise of Skywalker yet, but I'm just guessing it's probably pretty funny because they do some pretty good stuff over there, Murray. All right. Enrique305 writes, can the Man of Steel take on Captain Marvel? Yes. Man of Steel, Superman is the granddaddy of all superheroes. So yes, Superman. I mean, look, it depends who's writing it. If a Marvel writer is writing it, they probably write that Captain Marvel wins. But if somebody with sanity is writing it, then Superman wins every time, unless it's Batman, of course. The Annoying One writes, hey, John, can you do a top 10 list of the most annoying times somebody asked you, what are your top 10 things? Yeah, because so what Annoying One is referring to is I generally, especially for the live questions, I don't like top 5, top 10 questions, because these are things I would need to sit down, think about, write out, chart out, blah, blah, blah. So I generally don't like doing those things. But anyway, well pointed out, Annoying One, well pointed out. All right, Ryan Lohner writes, I'm kind of hoping James Gunn will shout F Marvel at Suicide Squad premiere just to keep the tradition alive. Rob, that reminds me, it's crazy because it was at the height of the whole Marvel versus DC thing, right? And you remember when Jason Momoa said that? He said, F Marvel, right? Everybody took him so seriously and got all mad and was like, dude, they're playing it up. They're having fun with it. I mean, why am I freezing on the name of the dude who plays Falcon? Sam, the guy who plays
Anthony
Falcon.
Mackie?
Anthony Mackie, who plays Sam. I remember in a great interview, like, he was going on and playing into it too. It's like, man, we got Steve Rogers. We got Captain America, man. He's going on about why it's so much better than what they had coming out with DC, but it was in fun. And I just remember people really taking that. But Rob, like James Gunn being the shit disturber that he is, couldn't you totally see him showing up at the premiere and saying that, especially since he is in Marvel and doing a Marvel film as soon as he's done Suicide Squad?
Of course. That would be hilarious.
I would love it. I would love it. And there would, of course, be some people that take it all dead seriously and would be offended, but most of us would know in the fun that would probably be meant as. All right, Tajan Cars writes, one of two. Shout out to everyone who was old enough to experience how big of a deal Batman 1989 was. We see it all the time now, but for 89, it felt world dominating. Played well over a year in $1 theaters. Revisited Batman 89 for the first time in 20 years. Damn does it hold up. Funny thing though, the Wayne scene feels more like a partially created memory of Bruce after watching Joker. Haha, I see what you're saying there. But listen, Taj, I remember I've told the story a lot in the last couple of years since my friend died, but you know, I have told the story. My best friend growing up who died just a couple of years ago, he and I went to go see Batman 89. And we were young, but, you know, we took a bus to downtown Hamilton, to the Jackson Square Mall in Hamilton, Ontario, where they had these theaters in there. And Rob, I'm telling you, it is the first time that I had gone to a movie and saw, I didn't think lines like that existed. It was the first time that I went and like, because the theater was inside the heart of the mall, right? The lineup went all the way down the main hallway in the mall, around the corner, all the way down the parallel main hallway, out the door, onto the street, down the sidewalk. I had never seen anything like that. Now, granted, I was only about, what was I, like 15 or something like that, 15, 16? Anyway, to see that, I was like, This is for a movie? This is for a movie. I had never seen anything like that. So he's right. That was a big deal. What are your memories of going to see that movie for the first time?
Dude, I went to the world premiere.
Really?
I went to the world premiere. It was in Westwood, and I sat in Jack Nicholson's row. I've even got my ticket.
I remember. Yes, you told me that before.
Yeah, there's a ticket. There's a picture of me with my Zach Morris Saved by the Bell hair going to that screening. And it was a big deal. The way we got our tickets was a buddy and I, Wayne Mogilevsky, a friend of mine who I'd met at USC, we were coming back from Lake Tahoe, and you had to like go to Westwood at midnight or something, and they were going to give out a certain amount of tickets to the premiere. And it was it was the first time I went to a movie premiere in LA. I'd only lived here for a year, and all of Westwood, they showed it at the Fox, the Bruin, and the Village, and it was a madhouse. It was just amazing, and it was so much fun to go to that. And I was in the Bruin, actually. I wanted to be in the Village, but I was in the Bruin. But it was still, because it was all assigned seating. It was amazing. It was an amazing thing. It was the very first real Hollywood premiere I ever went to.
All right, let's move on here. Next up, Casinema Reviews writes, just like the Rey Palpatine reveal, the reveal of Palpatine's body being a clone is an answer that just creates more questions. Again, because it's not what they had planned. This is clearly not what they thought they were doing. All right? It would have been, if something as major and significant that this is a clone, that's something you reveal in the movie. That's something you at least mention in the movie.
Yeah.
It's certainly something you mention in the visual dictionary. That's the book that is meant to explain everything that's in the movie. It certainly would have been there. This is just another example of them not knowing which way they're going. They're turning left, not realizing they're turning into a wall, then suddenly trying to turn right. It's just another example that they are chasing their own tails there right now, and they've got lucky. They've gotten lucky and churned out some great movies that have all made $1 billion and all. That's great, but you can only do that for so long until it all starts to bubble to the surface. And we're starting to see that now. And we saw that with The Rise of Skywalker. And this is just I'm not going to go off on the roof. I'm not going to go off again. All right, Mandalorian of Gondor writes, John, I really like the new Invisible Man movie, and it got me thinking about another suspense film 10 years ago, Shutter Island. Such an underrated film. What are your thoughts on this film, and could we see Scorsese do something like that again? Oh, we could absolutely see Scorsese. Like, that type of a film is really, even though some people consider it really different, if you actually look at the texture of the movie, it is very much a Martin Scorsese movie. So I could absolutely see him do something like that again. And it's the movie that really showed the type of working relationship that he was able, that DiCaprio was truly his new Robert De Niro. Because remember, Scorsese, Robert De Niro was his guy. And I think that was a film that to a lot of people that they recognized that was it. Rob, what are your memories of Shutter Island? And I agree. I think it's an underrated film.
Well, yeah, I saw that again. I saw that at Universal for the first time, and I didn't know much about it, when I went and saw it, and I thought it was really, really intriguing, and there is a twist, obviously, in it, and I found it was poignant to me, and I really like Shutter Island, and it's one of those movies that he has grown on me over the years. I know there's some people that don't like it very much, but I think DiCaprio is great in it. It's beautifully photographed, and I think it's a great movie. I really, really love it.
All right, let's move on here. Next one comes to us from Sam O'Neill, who writes, that Endgame analogy get me good the other day. Oh, God, man, I wish I could remember which analogy it was. I can't remember which one it was. Sorry about that. But thank you for the well wishes on that, Sam. James Durden writes, if it's true that the novelization says Palpatine was a clone in Rise of Skywalker, I don't buy it that it was the plan all along. Oh, I don't either. It's damage control, plain and simple. It could have been explained in the movie with one line of dialogue if that was a plan. No, I agree. Either that, in the visual dictionary. I mean, at some point, this is clearly a reaction. This is clearly a reaction that should have just been well enough left alone. Because, Rob, I feel like at some point, you just cut your losses, At some point, you just cut your losses and say, okay, people were unhappy with the way we did that. Okay, some people were unhappy with the way we did that. Leave it alone. You don't just keep shoveling the hole deeper. You exasperate the problem than doing anything else. I don't know, Rob. Is the problem not the answer that it's a clone? Is the problem the fact that they just keep trying to adapt the answer? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, look, we have these stories where the Star Wars, the first Star Wars, established that there is a path to becoming a Jedi Knight. And we, as fans of Star Wars, suddenly that became something in our minds that lived. And then we saw that path developed further in Empire and in Return of the Jedi. You know, the final path, Luke confronting Vader and the Emperor, was really the end of his journey toward becoming a Jedi. And so all of these questions, you're asking yourself, if Palpatine apparently dies, and then suddenly he comes back, any astute viewer or fan of Star Wars is going to ask, how? This is storytelling 101. This is a kindergartner would ask this. A 5-year-old would say, like, well, I just watched Return of the Jedi and I don't understand how Palpatine came back. Explain it to me. This is basic storytelling. And it's just absolutely frustrating when they do stuff like this, because it's insulting to fans. It's insulting to astute viewers. It's insulting to children that will watch Star Wars for the first time that haven't even been born yet. And it's like when you do this, you denigrate all of it, you know, because it gives you the feeling that I guess they just didn't care enough to have any of this make sense. And that's distressing.
Yeah, that's a good word. It's distressing. All right. Java Man in Hong Kong writes, my favorite foreign film movies post the 1980s, Cinema Paradiso, The Untouchables, Amelie, which is great, Infernal Affairs, all-time favorite cop film, Life is Beautiful, one of the greatest, probably the greatest foreign film ever made in my opinion, The Moon's Wedding, Wings of Desire, Three Color Trilogy, Parasite, A Separation from Iran, Europa, Double Life of Veronique, where do we go here? A Prophet, Das Boot. That was one of the first foreign films I ever watched, was Das Boot, actually. That's, I think, the first foreign film I ever watched. Let the Right One In, so good. Your Name, Three Idols, Sin Nombre, Delicatessen, Grave of the Fireflies. I can never watch that film again. That's a heavy movie, dude. Blue is the Warmest Color. So gorgeous. 13 Assassins, Lahaini, Old Boy, Cold War, Spirit Away, The Raid. The Raid. Okay. Whew! That is a long list of films in there, dude. That is a long list of films. A number of these movies we've actually talked about ourselves on this thing the last few days. By the way, I want to bring it up again, just because I know we said it the other day, but I do want to say it again. Blue is the Warmest Color. Look, a lot of hot lesbian sex in the movie. Yes, there is. And it's great. Bring on the filthy. I love it. But a lot of people look at that movie and that's what they think of. Move past that.
Yeah.
It is a beautifully told character movie that the story is just in the way it's, look, there's two parts to making a good movie, the story and then the telling of the story, right? There's the story and then there's the telling of the story. Both are done so beautifully well, brilliantly and gorgeously acted. It is a wonderful film. Now, just a couple of quick mentions of some of the other ones on here that you mentioned. Life is Beautiful is obviously my favorite all-time foreign film. Roberto Benigni, the Italian film, one of the greatest all time. Infernal Affairs is my absolute favorite cop film, English or otherwise, ever made. Amelie might have been, if not the first, one of the first movies back when I scored films, Rob. It might have been the first or one of the first movies I ever actually gave a 10 out of 10 to.
Wow.
I think in my life I only gave like 7 or 8 films 10 out of 10s. But that was one of the first ones that I ever gave when once I actually started reviewing films. So do any of the films on this list jump out to you that Java Man gave us?
So many of them do. And like you, I'm a huge Amelie fan, but I thought that was a pretty great list of foreign films. I think all of them are very respectable. I mean, I'd like to see more. I'm a big fan of Kurosawa, so things like Seven Samurai or Rashomon have always been, especially Rashomon, one of my favorite movies. But everything on that list is very much worth watching, and I think it's a great overview. It'd be a great class to have to watch all of those movies on that list. So I was very impressed.
All right, let's move on here. Major Tom writes, 1 of 2. I thought The Rise of Skywalker was all right. Not the greatest, but not the worst. Hey, listen, there are a lot of people who really liked Rise of Skywalker. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you need to apologize for liking it. If you liked it, that's awesome. That's the greatest thing in the world. I didn't like it, and that's okay. Doesn't mean you shouldn't like it too. But not the worst. But this whole Palpatine clone bullshit It should have been in the movie. This stinks of laziness and or incompetence. They just can't help themselves, can they? Again, listen, and it hurts me. All right, anyway, let me keep reading Tom saying. If there was any proof that there was no plan for the new movies, Rise of Skywalker was it. There was a comic book series called Dark Empire. Yes, there was. That Disney could and probably should have drawn from the beginning. Could have been a path at least. I disagree. I've had that discussion with my friends before, Major Tom, about Dark Empire. I was cool that they were doing something else, like create their own thing. That's good. But again, it just shows that they never had a plan. Say what you will about the prequels, because I hate the prequels. There are things about the prequels that I like, but overall, I hate the prequels. Say what you will about the prequels. At least George had a coherent path and plan when he made them. I may not have liked the path and plan. I may not have liked what they did with it, but at least everything was consistent with itself. You know, it clearly, he had a roadmap and he followed his roadmap. And, you know, considering that I like a lot of the films that Disney has put out, most of them, man, imagine if they had a roadmap. If they had sat down, Rob, you and I talked about this the other day. If they had sat down and done what they're doing with this bloody High Republic novel series,
right?
Where they actually put the care and concern, where they gather a big writer's room and chart out and plan out who are our villains going to be? What heroes are we going to have? What's the world like now in this era of Star Wars? How are our stories going to unfold and go? If they had put that type of care and love and concern into these movies, imagine how much better they could have been. I don't know. It's frustrating, Rob. It's frustrating. But on the question that Major Tom raises, though, about, you know, that coming up with their own original stories, should they have just gone back and drawn from old material? Or do you feel like I do that, no, it was better to come up with something brand new and fresh and move forward? What do you think?
No, I think that I think it's better that they came up with something new and unique, because if you're going to go back and mine the old EU, that's a lot to do. And there's a lot of different authors that would then be involved in the mix. I think that they did what they needed to do, which was give us new characters and new situations. I think the biggest mistake that was made was that first movie should have been the final mission, the final adventure of Luke, Han, Leia, and R2-3PO, Chewie, Lando, whomever, and we should have seen those characters together, and they should have introduced our new characters within the context of our old characters sort of passing the torch. So we would have had more interest in them, because they all probably would have been working together in some way, shape, or form. And that's the only thing that I think that was the real misstep, is that they didn't give us that. And it's kind of shocking to me that they didn't. But I think,
but
like,
you know, I love the first film. I love the Force Awakens the way it is.
I know. But I mean, it could have been that way, but I would like to have seen all of our characters together, because I think that's where it should have began. And it should have given us the joy of seeing them together, and then start taking apart the universe.
All right, let's keep going here. We only got time for a couple more here, guys. Java Man writes, third favorite set of foreign film movies: Pan's Labyrinth, great. Downfall, Force Majeure, I'm not familiar with that one. Divine Bell and Butterfly, Ran, Why to Mama Te Bien, I always mispronounce this one, the French one, Persepolis, City of God, The Lives of Others, Incendies. I'm also not familiar with that one. Gamora, Battle...
Denis Villeneuve's first movie.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I know what that one is. Thank you. Gamora, Battle Royale. Of course, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have had the Hunger Games. Goodbye, Lenin, In the Mood for Love. Why to Mama, I always mispronounce it. Tambien. Again, another movie, Rob, that a lot of people look at and think, ooh, for all the filthy that's in it. But it's a marvelous, fantastic movie. Do you got one on this particular list that stands out to you the most?
Oh, God. I like Y Tu Mama Tambien a lot. It's a great film. And a lot of those I actually own. And, of course, I own Persepolis as well. And let's see, what other ones do I own? But, yeah, those I it's a great list.
All right. Ugly Movie Fan writes, "You drew me quite handsomely, sir. Thank you." Of course, that's another reference to my gorgeous, gorgeous artwork right there. There you go. Rob looks even better. Rob looks better than he's ever looked before. Look at that. What a piece of art right there. Oh, that was terrible. It was so bad. Okay. Last group of questions here. We're through some here from 50 Shade. 50 Shade writes, "I didn't see The Invisible Man until today because in my country it's called Unseen." Really? So I didn't even know it came out until I looked into it. What the hell is the problem with calling it The Invisible Man anyway? That's a good question. That often comes up a lot about many times a movie will have a different title in a foreign market. Now, sometimes it could be a rights issue. That could be a matter that in certain country, like for instance, in Canada, remember the band Bush? Well, yeah. In Canada, there was a copyright problem because another band had been called Bush and they were suing them. So in Canada, Bush had to be known as Bush X. So it could be a copyright issue, or maybe they just think nobody in our country knows what The Invisible Man is. We'll call it Unseen or something. I don't know, but it is something that frustrates us a lot of the times. 50 Shades of Geek also writes, "As for the movie itself, well, let's just say I'm going to sleep tonight with the light on, both eyes open, and my dog by my side, and maybe a bodyguard or two." Oh, and then he says, "The Invisible Man was a little disappointing, though. That guy looks nothing like John Cena." That was, of course, the running joke that, you can't see me, that a lot of people would often joke about how The Invisible Man is basically a biopic about John Cena. And then finally, 50 Shades writes, okay, enough of the jokes. I like The Invisible Man a lot. Not a perfect movie, but a great movie experience. I have so many questions, but all of them are spoiler related. When can I send them in a month, maybe more? Usually, generally speaking, the rule for us openly discussing some spoilers in some movies is, number one, the movie has to be done its theatrical run. And then number two, it needs to be out on home video for at least a few weeks, maybe a month or two. Because that then truly gives anybody who really is interested in seeing the movie a lot of chance to watch the movie. Because my feelings is, if you didn't watch a movie when it came out in theaters during its entire theatrical run, and then you've gone like a month or more when it's been available on home video and you still haven't watched it, then don't cry to me about how interested you are in the movie, because clearly you're not that interested in it. So, but usually, so it's probably going to be about 3 or 4 months. It's probably going to be about 3 or 4 months, 50 Shades. And then last question we're going to take today comes to us from Patrick Conway, who writes, "Do you think WandaVision will market the action?" Well, I don't know, because I don't know how much action is going to be in the show. I mean, it doesn't seem like, not every Marvel property has to be a big action piece, right? I mean, it seems to me like there's something stranger going on than just straight action. Like, I'm sure there will be some action in it, but I don't know how much action it'll have. Rob, what are you suspecting right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when people say action, I don't necessarily know we're going to be getting that kind of a show. When people say action, I think we're going to get a lot of crazy, mind-bending, reality-warping fun, but I don't know if we're going to get superhero battles. I don't know, so It's hard to say. What they've shown us doesn't seem to bode well for those people who want to see knockdown, drag-out battles. But you never know.
Sure. I think it's going to be a different kind of show, so we'll have to wait and see. All right, now this will be the last question we take today. Comes to us from Blake, who writes, "I know this news regarding Palpatine isn't going to change your view of the movie, but my question is, if the book actually explains all this better, could it change your view of the canon story? Because those are two separate things for me. Thanks." I see where you're coming from, Blake. I see where you're coming from. The problem is, it just creates another problem. If something like Palpatine being a clone is actually what they're now saying is their canon, which, by the way, Pablo Hidalgo says that the book is only canon if it doesn't contradict what's in the movie. The movie says nothing about him being a clone. So I don't even know if Star Wars is officially saying that, the official canon line now is that he's a clone, because there have been other things in the novels that they've said, yeah, that's not canon, but you said everything in the novels is canon, except for that. So I don't even know if Star Wars' official position now on Palpatine is if he's a clone or not. It creates a new problem. It doesn't make anything better in the movie because it's not in the movie. If it's not in the movie, don't bother me with it. If it's important and critical, which this issue is, then it needs to be in the movie. And if you didn't put it in the movie, then don't bother me with it later. Don't say, well, in the 2012 comic book of Vader's Day Off, they say in page 7, paragraph 5, in the third panel, Vader mentions this and that. Don't give me that bullshit. I don't need it. The movie's the movie. That's the main thing, is the movie. And if you got it in the movie, don't give me this bullshit about putting it in somewhere later. Little details that give us a wider understanding of some behind the scenes things, that stuff's cool. But things like that, it just creates more of a problem, Blake. And Rob, I've always hated this, because I remember when after the third Matrix film came out, they did Animatrix. Remember that?
Yeah.
Which a lot of people liked Animatrix, but a lot of people said, oh, well, this now lets us understand what's going on. And I remember at the time saying, no. Don't make it so if I don't read or watch some of this, extra stuff, some of this extracurricular material, that's the only way I can truly understand the movies, if I go off and watch the 17 other pieces of content. No, don't give me that BS. The movie's the movie. The movie has to stand on its own. The movie's got to explain what's going on inside of the movie. Don't give me this BS that I got to go watch something else or go read something else in order to understand a fundamental issue. So I don't know. Doesn't that make sense, Rob? I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yes, no, it does, especially... I mean, this is one of the burning questions any astute movie viewer would ask themselves. And they don't answer it in the film. They don't even try. And all they do, all of Exegol is just one big, it's 10,000 different questions. And none of them are answered. How are there so many ships? Where did all these people come from? If you needed a wayfinder to get there, how did all the other people who are commanding or in those Star Destroyers, how did they get there? How did the heavy metal fans in the Sith Temple get there? Where are they living? Do they have houses? Do they eat? Like, what the hell's going on? You don't see any suburban environment on Exegol. It's just a temple and Palpatine. It's like,
do they have a Taco Bell there? Is there a McDonald's? Do they send mail?
I thought it's the sloppiest kind of science fiction filmmaking, because it doesn't give you any answers, and you're sitting there just, if you don't have any answers and you have no understanding, then you're not as involved with the story as you could be. And I'm not saying they have to explain everything, but they have to give you enough as a viewer to infer certain things about what's going on with the world that they've built. I mean, Star Wars is a genius example, the first Star Wars, of showing you a bunch of stuff that completely reinforces the world. And just by having things in the background, you get it. You totally get what's going on. And they don't have to spell everything out, but they show you enough to believe. And that was the genius of Star Wars. And I think one of the things about the prequel or the sequel trilogy was it was very sloppy in that regard. You didn't understand anything, beginning with, who is Lor San Tekka? Who is Max von Sydow? Why is he on this planet? What the hell's going on here? You don't know.
Yeah, and again, I feel like the non-essential stuff, like in the first movie when they talk about the Senate, it's like, okay, we didn't need to, how did the Senate get to that position? Well, we didn't need to know in the first movie how the Senate got to that. But Rob, when it comes to these core important things that fundamentally define how we understand what's going on in this narrative, they just seem to, I don't know.
But what you bring up with a Senate and an empire, we understand that because we understand about the fall of Rome, and we get how a Senate works. And you've got a million different examples, whether you're thinking about a Roman Senate or the Senate we have here in the United States. So when someone says a Senate, we get that. We understand. So you don't have to give, the background. But when you saw that meeting of the Imperial generals in Star Wars, that defined the whole universe. Once we had that information, we understood the power structure. We understood that Tarkin was the head of these guys. We understood that Vader was a subordinate to Tarkin. We got all of that in a brilliant sequence that lasts probably less than 5 minutes. And we're given everything we need to know. And we understand. We're like, oh, okay. I get it now. We had nothing like that in Rise of Skywalker. So how do we know about anything? What's going on here?
All right. Anyway, guys, We've run out of time here for today's show, but listen, there are a bunch of other people who had questions still left over from Blake, JB Bonifacio, Eric C, Unwise Woe, Stubble McShave, on and on. There's a whole bunch of questions still to come. Do not worry, guys. We're going to do a companion video a little bit later today and get through all the rest of these questions a little bit later tonight. Keep your eyes open for that. And then we will, of course, be back for tomorrow's installment of the John Campea Show. Guys, thanks so much for being here. And, of course, special thanks to Robert Meyer Burnett for being here and a part of the show today. Rob, where can people find you and your adventures online?
Well, people can find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, find me on Instagram at Robert Meyer Burnett, or find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work, and my show, Robservations, the show about something.
All right, guys. And of course, you can follow me on all the various social media networks, simply at John Campea. Thanks to all of you guys for making this show a part of your day. Listen, time is a precious commodity, and we appreciate it so much that you choose to invest some of your time in hanging out with us and the rest of the film fan community here to talk about our favorite things in the world. And a special thank you to all you guys who did send in those questions, not just because you gave us great fun things to talk about, but you supported the channel and the content that we make while you did it. And all of us here on the John Campea YouTube channel, thank you guys very, very much for all of that. Of course, we'll be back again tomorrow for the John Campea Show. Listen, guys, if you like these types of videos and discussions, whether you agree with our conclusions or not, if you like these types of discussions, make sure you go down and click the thumbs up button. That really helps the channel out a lot. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. That will do it for us for now, guys. Thank you so much for being here and being part of the show today. My name is John Campea, folks, and until next time, bye-bye.